I think when it's hard to realize that you have something when that's normal to you. Does that make sense? It's normal to you. Maybe everybody in the world feels like this. It's not anything different than anything else. It's not a diagnosis, it's the human condition. My name is Jennifer, and I am a nurse working on the front lines of the pandemic with the diagnosis of anxiety. So I actually, for most of my life, grew up in Florida, and I'm back in Florida now, working in Florida. So it's kind of like I've come full circle. But yeah, I grew up in Florida. I went to college in Orlando, and this was like 23 years ago. I graduated from nursing school. So I've been doing this for 23 years, and every time I say that, it kind of blows my mind that it's been 23 years, but here I am. And I specialized pretty early on in my career. About 3 years in, actually, I specialized, which means you just get a little bit more education in one particular area of nursing. So for me, it was wound care, and I kind of just fell into it by accident, and I'm still doing it today. So obviously, it was a happy accident. And then a few years after that, I actually was a travel nurse off and on for about 8 years. So I traveled around the country, and I would say that experience of traveling around the country, working in just about every type of environment or hospital that you can think of, from large teaching hospitals to small, really almost like charity hospitals, and doing just about every kind of nursing really gave me a lot of perspective. And I think for me, when I tell my story, I think everything kind of comes back to perspective. So those 8 years for me were invaluable. And I actually found that I was highly adaptable and that I could do it, which was surprising for me. So even with anxiety, with the diagnosis of anxiety, being able to go into these unknown situations, unknown hospitals, unknown entities, and just hit the ground running and actually be successful at it. So for me, that was a real important time in my career. I never considered myself an anxious person ever. And the diagnosis came pretty late, and well, I say late in life, but pretty recently. I'm 45. So it came in my 40s after having lived apparently my whole life with anxiety and not knowing it. And when I went to see a neuropsychologist, neuropsychiatrist. I was seeing her at the hospital, which was great. Her office was just like on the same floor as mine. So I would just walk over and we would have our sessions. And it was actually just an incidental diagnosis. I was seeing her because I was diagnosed fairly recently with a chronic pain condition. And it turns out I've had that for most of my life as well. And I just didn't understand it. And unfortunately, the medical community does not really understand this diagnosis very well yet. There's only like 3 approved treatments for it. So it was kind of like a real bummer of a diagnosis for me because I had just gotten married, starting my new life with my husband, and we had just bought a house. And I knew that there was something wrong with me physically, but I did not realize that I also had this anxiety disorder. And I went to see this doctor. She was wonderful, and we clicked right away. And she told me that I had anxiety. And I was like, no, I don't. That's no, no, no. I'm not an anxious person. Look at everything that I've done and accomplished in my life. And I don't feel like I have anxiety. She says, you do, you have anxiety. And, she gave me some materials to take with me after that session. And I went through, it was kind of like a little exercise, some things to think about. And I started looking back at my life, all the way back to my childhood, internally, and looked at it through the lens of anxiety. And it reluctantly came to me that, yes, I can see now that since I was a child, I've probably had this condition, just didn't know it. I think when it's hard to realize that you have something when that's normal to you. Does that make sense? It's normal to you. Maybe everybody in the world feels like this. It's not anything different than anything else. It's not a diagnosis, it's the human condition. And, so when it was a shocker. It was a shocker when I got that diagnosis. But, when I think about everything that I've accomplished and everything that I've overcome in my life personally, I'm actually quite proud of myself for having made it without getting any help and any intervention for the anxiety. And, I try to think of it positively and I try not to be regretful. But of course, the first thing that came to my mind is, man, if only I had known, if only I had help or intervention or whatever, if only I had it back then. Imagine how much easier my life would have been, but it's made me who I am today. So, try very hard. And I actually don't have to try that hard anymore. It's easy for me now to just kind of think of it as something I can be proud of. Yeah. So when I look back through the lens of anxiety at my life and the struggles that I had, I think it showed up I remember one incident in particular. I was a teenager, I would say like high school age, and I don't even remember what I was upset about, what happened. I don't remember the trigger at all, but I remember just kind of like throwing a fit in my room and taking all of my shoes and throwing them at the back of the door. And I mean, it made a horrible noise. And, you know, people came in and were like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And it was like, I couldn't even explain why I was doing that. It was just obviously at that time I was experiencing some sort of anxiety, and I was not coping well with the situation because I did not know how. And that was my outlet, unfortunately, was kind of destructive. And I see that it's kind of the theme is destructive. For me, the undiagnosed anxiety and the unaddressed anxiety manifested itself as destruction in my life. And it was almost always self-destruction, like I was going to self-destruct. And I remember at one point in my life, and I don't remember exactly when my mom said this to me, but she says, Jennifer, it's almost like yourself or you're sabotaging yourself, And I mean, that's obviously now with the knowledge that I have and looking back, I think that was the effect that the anxiety had on me. And, it didn't show up like the stereotypical anxiety but a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the condition, including myself as a nurse, which is really shameful. I should have known better. But you get this stereotypical image in your mind of somebody having to breathe in a brown paper bag, because they're hyperventilating and they're, like struggling, or, symptoms. Sometimes people can have such bad anxiety, they have symptoms of a heart attack, stuff like that. That is unfortunately the stereotypical image that I had in my mind of anxiety. And that's why I was like, that's not me. I never had to breathe into a paper bag because I was hyperventilating, you know? But anxiety is, you know, so much more than what um, people tend to think it is. And it can manifest in a lot of different ways. And you have to remember, and this is something that was pounded into our heads when we were in nursing school, everybody is uniquely individual. And any condition is going to affect each individual differently, slightly differently or drastically differently. And, you know, I've seen that every day of my career, you know, so it took, you know, it was a hard pill to swallow, but I recognize it now that yes, in fact, it was manifesting in those self-destructive tendencies or self-sabotaging tendencies. That one is actually pretty easy. I actually know the answer to that, and it's perspective. Get some perspective, keep some perspective, have some perspective. It's easy to get tunnel vision in your life. It's easy, unfortunately, all too easy to become so focused on, you know, the microcosm that is your life, because in reality, you're just a grain of sand on the ocean floor, right? I mean, life, not just human life, but life, you know, in the planet, in the universe, you know, stretch your mind out as far as you want to, is infinite. Your life is just this itty bitty little microcosm, this itty bitty little drop of water in the ocean. And it's so easy to become so focused on it that you know, to you, it's the entire universe, what you're going through, what's happening right now. You know, it's the end of the world, you know, but it's not. You know, when you think about some of the ways that I, you know, remind myself of perspective is, you know, I think about the ocean. That's a big one for me. I love going, you know, being in Florida, I love going to the beach, and which is highly meditative, by the way. So find yourself something like that where you can just go and sit and meditate on the ocean waves, or maybe you're in the middle of the forest, whatever it is. But that's just an aside. But the ocean is a big theme in my life. And one of the ways is that it gives me perspective. I think about when I get overwhelmed, or I find that I am like so focused on, you know, I'm getting tunnel vision, I can't see anything else around me. Think about the ocean, you know, think about how vast it is. We don't even know the extent of the ocean. We've never explored it completely or reached its depths. And that makes me feel small, but in a good way, you know, like, oh, okay, what I'm going through right now in this moment, it's not the end of the world. This too shall pass. And one of the things I like to ask myself is, am I even going to remember this next week, next month, next year? You know, am I even going to remember this day? And the answer is usually no. I mean, you know, I can't even remember from one day to the next sometimes what I did. You know, what did I have for lunch yesterday? I have no idea. So in a week and a month, you're not even going to remember today and this struggle, this challenge that you feel like is the end of the world. It's not. And getting perspective and having perspective, for me, I gained so much perspective when I was a travel nurse and experiencing how different things can be in different places. It helped me find what I wanted. It helped me get direction in my life. This perspective helped me get direction because I knew which way I wanted to go once I had gained that perspective. And then just in my daily life, reminding myself, you know, of how small this moment is in reality and that it will pass. We will get through this. And when we do, yes, it's going to possibly be an important part of our history. But look at history. Look how far back history goes, you know, millions of billions of years, this is just a blip on the radar, just a blip. And for me, having that perspective and recognizing that everything that you think is so significant, yes, there are important things that you need to live through today, tomorrow, you do need to go through it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that significant. And for me, that helps, because what it does for me in my mind, it shrinks my challenges down to a manageable size. It's no longer that mountain that I have to climb. It's now just a little tiny molehill that I can do this, I can do this. So get some perspective, have some perspective in your life. And, if you ever have an opportunity to expand your horizons, so to speak, and to gain even more perspective, take it. Take those opportunities. And, it was one of the best things that I ever did in my life and in my career, was to have that perspective. So that would be it. Driving home from work on a Sunday night, and my route usually takes me through downtown, but it was barricaded, like police vehicles everywhere, lights flashing, and rerouted, had to take a detour to the interstate. And I'm driving down the interstate, and I'm already pretty upset as it is, with the pandemic having been going on for many months already. And then also I care deeply about these issues, like the Black Lives Matter, and just it all. I was taking it all on, basically. And I'm driving home on the interstate. I look over towards downtown, and the whole thing is like barricaded off, and there's like armored vehicles, and I knew that there was supposed to be some peaceful protests there that night, and I could just feel myself losing it for the rest of the drive home, seeing all of these emergency and police and law enforcement vehicles going towards downtown as I'm driving home. And by the time I got home, I lost it. I was in tears, like just inconsolable. And my poor husband is is trying to comfort me, but I remember I just kept saying, I don't want anyone else to die. I don't want anyone else to die, And all that stress, anxiety, exhaustion, everything just caught up to me and overwhelmed me. And the next couple of days I had off. And this was kind of a turning point for me as far as dealing with things appropriately. I'm laying in the backyard, staring up at the sky, reflecting on how things are going right now for me mentally, as well as, what's going on in the world right now at that time. And I just remember thinking, this is not sustainable. I cannot keep going like this. It's not sustainable. And that was a real turning point for me. And fortunately, or unfortunately, I don't, looking at the silver lining here, I got around that time the diagnosis of the chronic pain disorder. And part of the treatment of that is to go see the neuropsychiatrist, got the diagnosis of anxiety, which apparently I had had my whole life, along with the chronic pain disorder, news to me. But along with that came all of these tools. And for me, that has really been the focus of my experience now. It's, the diagnosis of anxiety, the diagnosis of chronic pain disorder, that's in the background. For me, the stuff that's in the foreground, the stuff that is the biggest part of my life, is the tools that I have learned from this experience for dealing with anxiety and overcoming the stress and the challenges of being a nurse working on the front lines of the pandemic, you know? So yeah, that's it.
Thanks for watching. Hit the like button and comment with your own thoughts and experiences. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe to our channel at Real Life Videos. Let's rehumanize.